Okay, so we then packaged it into 12 grand challenges, and you can see that there's 3 main themes, as I mentioned now, is Eskom's future generation mix. And what we have, this is very high level. There's a brief overview in the following slides in terms of what we're trying to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years in each one of these areas. So in terms of the future generation mixes, what are we doing with our coal? How are we, what role is coal going to play moving forward? Is it going to be a dying energy source that's going to have to be phased out? What are we doing as a water scarce country, to reduce our water, considering that we need to clean up our act in terms of the environment? And if we're looking at flue gas desulfurization, which is a very water intensive process, how are we still going to maintain or remain within our 2% water allocation? Clean coal is, how do we extract energy out of coal without necessarily needing to mine it? What do we then do in terms of perhaps carbon capture and storage, and just reducing the impact of coal on the environment? Gas. Do we even play in the gas space? I know there's Igoli gas, but is it a space that Eskom has to play in? And how does Eskom play into that space? And how do we introduce it as a viable part of our energy mix? Obviously, knowing that the potential for peaking power is significant when you're dealing with gas. Nuclear. You will know that the 9.6 gigawatts in the IRP was allocated to Eskom, and Eskom then needed to make plans in terms of how it's going to meet that demand and the allocation that was provisionally given to them. On the renewable space is, what does Eskom, if Eskom is not given an allocation? So it's important to note that, and a lot of people ask me, and I know probably not in this room, but people would ask me, why isn't Eskom building renewables plants? Eskom cannot build renewables plants let's decide today, let's build a plant. We need to be allocated, we need to be given an allocation by the Department of Energy to do so. So it's not what Eskom feels like building, and we don't want to build renewables plants. Whatever goes into the grid, in terms of utility scale, you need to have an allocation from the Department of Energy. And we have not been given an allocation to build renewable plant outside of the 200 megawatts that we currently have, which is 100 megawatts for our Seri wind farm, operating down in the Western Cape. And then there was the balance of that was for a concentrated solar plant in Uppington, which I will, if anybody wants more detail, I can give them. But that's going to open a whole new can of worms if I start that right now. So obviously you have seen that the organization is undergoing energy availability challenges. In terms of supporting the existing business, so one of the areas that we currently challenged at is, and that is a bit of that is an error. Sorry, it should be 80-10-10, not 80-20-0. We wish it was 80-20-0. And what that basically means is 80% availability of our plant, 10% planned maintenance, and 10% unplanned maintenance. Obviously, things happen that you cannot predict, and that is termed unplanned maintenance or unplanned UCLF, which forces your plant down. We are hoping to get there within the next, well, very soon. Let me not say when. But we are not there currently. Our energy availability is hovering around 70-71%, which means that we have more unplanned outages and slippage of planned maintenance. Okay, then transmission asset management. That is just how do we manage our large-scale transmission assets? How do we sweat them? How do we get the most out of them? And any initiative in a research space that could support that. Transmission build as well. Where do we build? What transmission infrastructure? What can help the transmission build infrastructure space? Distribution performance. Our system average interruption duration index. There's also SAFE, which is the frequency index, is how do we reduce outage, well, not outages that is happening at generation level, but how do we reduce our service provision interruptions and the frequency and the duration thereof. What I've highlighted in the red circle is new business. Now, historically, RT&D focused on the middle section and a little bit of the section to the left. We've never had to apply ourselves and our skills to developing business solutions and developing alternative business models that could generate additional revenue for the organization and at the same time feed into the National Development Plan objectives in terms of building skills and building enterprise, etc. So what we have two focus areas in focusing on new business is future customer. What does that future customer want? Obviously they want solutions that are cheaper, smarter, faster. We've also realized that if we don't come up with these solutions, someone else will, and have already. Slowly but surely, we're seeing an increase in that disruption to our existing business model. Then we have the flexibility. How do we bring flexibility into our system? Because what you would see is that the more defection and the trend that we're seeing is obviously people are defecting during sunlight periods, during off-peak periods. And that is symptomatic of the amount of PV that is installed within the system, within the energy landscape of South Africa. And it is having other than the decline in the mining sector, which is also causing revenue losses, we also have people defecting off the grid. This has an impact on the flexibility of our existing grid. Obviously, the bulk of what is available now is baseload. Baseload, you cannot just ramp up and down at willy-nilly. If the defection off the grid continues, there will be a point where we will not have sufficient load following plant. Somewhere in the future, we won't have sufficient load following plant. After we've started reusing our OCGTs, etc., at some point we won't be able to ramp up within the seconds required to meet evening peak and morning peak. So we've seen this as a challenge for the organization, and we said, so what can we do around future customer that would shift behaviors so that there's an uptake, we stimulate an uptake during off-peak periods so that your evening peak isn't as severe to deal with. That's where energy storage comes into play as well. So I'm not going to go through all of this. In terms of our 12 grand challenges, each one has very high level, is unpacked at a very high level in terms of what our objective is over the next 3 to 5 years. Okay? Then, because of the topic of my discussion, I highlighted the renewables and the future customer and flexibility. So in the research space, we are moving into demonstration because a lot of your research, a lot of your technologies are commercially available. Yes, they are getting cheaper with time. There is cheaper alternatives coming out in terms of PV, etc. We see them moving on a monthly basis. But what we are going to be doing is to have 3, aside from the rural microgrid, have 3 additional renewables applications, demonstrating them within the next 3 years. And if you're asking why 3 years, anybody that works for a state-owned entity will know that, before you can spend any money, you have to go through Treasury, and rightfully so. That in itself takes quite a long time. So where we're going to be focusing our renewables efforts on is on looking at providing renewables as an option. Not totally taking customers off the grid, but providing them a tariff for renewables and still obviously keeping them grid tied. during peak periods. We're also then looking at the application of renewables with storage to strengthen grids, and once again where we don't have grid connection, where there are customers waiting. Future customer, this is probably the most exciting space for me, is we currently have 2 major projects running in this space. It's e-mobility and how Eskom enters into the e-mobility space. What would be a win-win value proposition for everybody in that space? And we've made significant headway. Our business case has been approved by Exco. Then we also have the distributed energy resources, looking at the entire LSM. What different business solutions do you offer? Lower LSMs, medium LSMs, and higher LSMs. Because the risk and we can offer the best system or the best inverters, etc. What that just means is that your lower LSMs will be more tied to the grid and will, heaven forbid, have to absorb the impact of grid costs, which is definitely not what we want to do. So it has to be an all-inclusive and different solutions for everyone. On the flexibility, I mentioned that we actually do have a first of its kind on the continent. We have an energy storage testing facility at Rocheville, where we're testing different battery technologies, and we're putting it through its paces. And some of our PV, we've got a PV array as well at Rocheville, charges those batteries, and we use them back into our building. Our project timelines, next 3 to 5 years, you will see that the rural microgrid is closest to delivery in terms of the rollout. And just from a planned allocation, renewables specifically, we've got about 5% of, this is in the public domain, so I'm not sharing any state secrets here. We're spending about 5% of our financial year 2019 budget specifically on renewables, and then about 11% on future customer, which also includes renewables. While we're busy also servicing existing business and looking at what our next generation capability is going to look like. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.